Hey, what time do you think it is?
As I glanced at the clock, it was only 5:30 a.m. What time? It's only 5:30. What's going on so early in the morning? I answered groggily, but James kept on mercilessly.
What do you mean it's only 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to wake up earlier than her husband. Get ready and prepare breakfast.
Hearing James continue to shout like this first thing in the morning, I couldn't believe my ears. What era is he even talking about? It was like a line from an old drama, said by a mean mother-in-law. Since getting married to James, we had separate baths and bedrooms, and no intimacy at all. Then one day, James collapsed at work and had to be hospitalized immediately for surgery. As I waited outside the operating room, I heard a young doctor's scream.
What on earth is this?
This surgery would reveal a shocking secret about James. It also made me realize the tough situation I was in. Feeling that I couldn't go on like this, I decided to reclaim my true self with a certain someone's help. My name is Susan Brown, a 42-year-old housewife helping out sometimes with my husband's business. Before getting married, I worked as a caregiver in a hospital. I enjoyed my work to some extent, but I was the only one among my friends who wasn't married. Both my parents had passed away, and feeling alone in the world, I was desperate to get married. Then one day, I was drinking alone in a bar when a man approached me.
Excuse me, may I sit here?
The man who spoke to me was James, my current husband. James, 3 years my senior, owned a small manufacturing company. As we talked, it seemed he was also single, without a partner. During our conversation, we clicked and felt a connection. Two singletons of age. I was hoping for a romantic night, but instead, we agreed to meet again soon and called it an early night. After that, we started dating and saw each other weekly. Dates with the serious and quiet James were just quiet conversations in cafes and parks. But gradually, I was drawn to his seemingly good character. Then, on our third date,
Considering our age, it doesn't make sense to just keep dating aimlessly.
seeing James nervously start to speak, I felt a little flutter of expectation. Are you suggesting?
Yes, we've only been dating for a month, but since we're close in age, I was thinking maybe we should get married. Is that okay with you?
It was indeed an unusual proposal. But I was eager to marry and thought well of James, so I quickly agreed. Of course, I'd be happy to. With my acceptance, James beamed with happiness. Since neither of us had parents, we decided not to have a wedding ceremony and simply registered our marriage. I quit my job to help with James's company, and thus started our married life. But it was the beginning of days filled with struggles. James and I had not been intimate before marriage. I thought since he was such a serious person, he wouldn't casually engage with women. I believed that marriage would naturally lead to an enjoyable marital life. However, on our very first day as a married couple, James laid down some unexpected rules.
I'll sleep in the main bedroom, so Susan, you sleep in the spare bedroom. Also, I often work late, so please take your bath first.
Surprised by James's words, I asked in disbelief. What? Separate baths and bedrooms, even though we're newlyweds? Despite my questions, James just kept a straight face and stood by his statement.
I can't sleep well when I'm in the same room with someone. Besides, the bathroom is small, so it's not like we could share it.
Despite my dissatisfaction with his reasoning, I didn't want to start an argument on our first day, so I didn't say anything more. The next morning, I was startled awake by a loud voice, even though I had set my alarm for 6 a.m.
Hey, what time do you think it is?
When I checked the clock, it was only 5:30 a.m. What time? It's only 5:30. What's up with you, so early in the morning? I answered with sleep in my eyes, but James continued relentlessly.
What do you mean it's only 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to wake up earlier than her husband, get ready, and have breakfast prepared.
I couldn't believe my ears as James continued to raise his voice from the morning. What era is he even talking about? It was like a line from an old drama, said by a mean mother-in-law. Though I fought this, looking at James's face, I saw a frightening expression I had never seen before. Feeling that it was not wise to confront him, I quickly changed and started preparing the meal. Maybe this goes without saying, but even though we have separate baths and bedrooms, we eat together. As we sat opposite each other at the breakfast table, something bothered me. It was already July, yet James was wearing a long-sleeve sweatshirt. Thinking I must also prepare his summer clothes, I asked him, "I'm sorry, only having a sweatshirt at this time of year. Should I prepare some summer clothes for you?" Choking on his food in response to my question, James hurriedly coughed and said,
Oh no, I wear this all year round because I'm cold. You know, with the air conditioning, it gets chilly.
Indeed, if he struggles with the cold, that's understandable. Still, it's strange how he was so obviously flustered. James's weird behavior left me unsure how to respond. From then on, although I went to work at the company in the morning, James instructed me to come home early to prepare dinner. James not only scrutinized our meals but also the way I clean and do the laundry, so even when I returned home early, I had no time to relax. I cleaned every corner of the house, folded the dry laundry. Preparing dinner and taking a bath before James gets home has become my daily routine since we got married. James is an old-fashioned husband who wouldn't do anything around the house. I understand he's busy as a business owner, but I wish he would help a bit with the housework. However, any slight dissatisfaction might lead to him shouting again. While preparing dinner, I suddenly thought, why did I even get married? Since then, we've had separate bedrooms, and there's been no intimacy. At this rate, I don't feel happy at all despite being married. Far from it, I might be losing my true self. With that thought, tears began to flow uncontrollably. I was sobbing alone, probably around 5 in the evening. My phone rang with a call from work. It was a female employee from our company.
Mrs. Brown, something terrible has happened. The president has suddenly collapsed. We've called an ambulance, so please head to the hospital immediately.
Hearing this, I was momentarily lost for words. Sensing my distress, the employee calmly informed me of the hospital's name. Trying to compose myself, I thanked the employee and immediately called a taxi. At the hospital, after giving my name at the reception, I was directed to the treatment room where James was. I was told to wait in front, so I sat down on a chair placed near the door. When the treatment room door opened, a veteran doctor around James's age came out. I stood up and approached the doctor. "Excuse me, I'm Susan Brown, James's wife. How is my husband's condition?"
Are you his wife? Your husband is not in life-threatening condition, but he needs to be hospitalized immediately and undergo surgery.
"Oh, is that so? Thank you. I appreciate your help." After greeting the doctor, I didn't see James, but proceeded with the hospitalization and surgery paperwork before returning home. Normally, I would have stayed by his side. The doctors and nurses might have thought I was a cold wife, but feeling disconnected from James, I couldn't bring myself to stay with him. And then, on the day of the surgery, I didn't meet with James before his surgery. I arrived at the hospital around the time it was supposed to start. While waiting outside, I could hear a young man scream coming from the operating room.
What on earth is this?
You're a doctor. For goodness sake.
It seemed like the scream was from an assisting surgeon. The senior doctor scolded the young doctor. The young doctor responded with a voice that seemed to tremble any moment now.
Yes, I know. But this is the first time I've seen such an incredible tattoo. What should I do?
Calm down. It won't interfere with the surgery.
What was all the fuss about? A loud voice that could be heard even outside the operating room. I think they were saying something about a tattoo. The assistant seemed unreliable, but the senior doctor seemed competent, so I waited at ease for the surgery to end. Several hours later, the surgery was over, and two doctors came out. One was the young doctor in his mid-20s who had screamed earlier. He seemed as if he had seen something unpleasant. The other was the chief surgeon, a veteran doctor I had met briefly the other day. The chief surgeon looked at the young doctor with a somewhat pitying expression. Indeed, the young doctor seemed, at best, like a pampered heir. I stood up and looked at the veteran doctor. Beside him, the young doctor bowed his head at me, seemingly apologetic, and said,
I'm sorry, about the tattoo on your husband's back.
Hey, stop that.
I didn't quite understand what the two were saying. The young doctor's words were concerning. You've been mentioning something about a tattoo. What is that about? To my question, both doctors looked surprised.
Oh, ma'am. It's about that large devil tattoo on your husband's back. It's completely covering his back, isn't it?
I was taken aback by the young doctor's unexpected reply. So that was why James had kept the bath and bedroom separate. The veteran doctor had a calm expression.
I apologize for the commotion. The surgery went smoothly. Your husband is fine now.
Can I speak to my husband now?
Yes, if you can wait a bit longer.
Told so, I waited for a while and then was led into the treatment room. There lay James, just waking up from anesthesia and dressed in a hospital gown. Noticing me, James made an awkward face.
I didn't want you to see me in this mess. Why are you here? I didn't call you.
James's blunt attitude left me unable to even offer a word of consolation. Perhaps James thought it was bad that his tattoo had been discovered. Though the devil on his back was not visible, his shoulders were clearly seen through the hospital gown. Yet, why did James think he could keep such a large tattoo hidden forever? Though I was curious, considering it was after surgery, I thought it could wait, and didn't ask anything. James still looked sullen, turning away from me. The young doctor, looking back and forth between James and me, asked, "Aren't you going to say something to your husband?" I didn't know what to say at such a time. Then James spoke.
Susan, if you have no business here, just go home. What do you mean, when you're just standing there with a gloomy face? It makes me feel like I'm at a funeral, and I don't like it. If you understand, please leave soon.
At James's tone, the young doctor furrowed his brow and tilted his head. He probably wondered if these two really were a couple. And he seemed puzzled by it. Right, it seems pointless to stay, so I'll leave now. Eventually, that's what I said, and I left the hospital as James had told me. On the way home, I wasn't quite in the mood to go home directly, so I ate dinner out. As I was leaving the restaurant, a man called out to me from behind.
Mrs. Brown.
When I turned around, there stood Dr. David Johnson, the chief doctor who had been in charge earlier. Dressed in a suit, it seemed David had just finished his work for the day. Thank you for earlier. I started to thank David, but he began speaking as if to interrupt me.
I had thought James had married well, but it seems there might be something going on.
From the way David spoke, it appeared he had known James from before. What do you mean by that?
No, I apologize for being rude. Just observing you, something seemed off. Normally, if a husband collapses at work and needs emergency hospitalization, a wife would stay by his side.
I'm sorry for causing trouble at the hospital. I apologized, thinking I had been a nuisance to the hospital staff. However, David shook his head and replied,
No, that's not what I mean. It's just, it seems you were unaware of the tattoo he has. It's been on my mind.
It seemed David knew something about James's tattoo. Curious, I asked him for more details. David revealed that he and James had been middle school classmates. James had been quite a troublemaker since 8th grade, riding around with his friends on motorcycles. James hardly attended school at that time. He had a large devil tattoo inked on his back to intimidate those around him. David, who had been the student council president at the time, could not stand such misconduct among his peers.
We were in the same class in our freshman year. We weren't close, but I always believed James wasn't inherently a bad guy.
It seemed David had wanted to reform James. With a firm resolve, he confronted the delinquent group James was part of, desperately trying to persuade him to change.
James, please leave this group and come back to school.
He said this as he desperately pleaded in front of a crowd of delinquents. Despite his resolve, David was treated terribly by James' friends. However, it seemed David's passion had an effect, as James eventually started attending school and later went on to a correspondence high school after graduation. I was just shocked to learn of James' past.
It seems James doesn't remember me anymore, but I'm glad to see he managed to reform and has been working earnestly. However, it seems things with his wife are not straightforward.
It was apparent even to others that our marital relationship was not normal. I felt both embarrassed and pitiful. I'm really embarrassed to think that even outsiders can see how unnatural our marital relationship is. David lightly shook his head again in response to my words.
No, it's not you who is unnatural. It seems to me that James is somehow disregarding you one-sidedly.
Upon hearing this, I too started to feel that might be the case. For some reason, I can talk about anything with David. Perhaps because he's a doctor, David knows how to offer support to the family members of patients during such times. I felt somewhat guilty thinking this. I'm sorry, doctor. I didn't mean to trouble you with such private matters.
No, right now, I'm not speaking as a doctor, but as an individual. I used to confront James because I couldn't stand his misconduct. But now, for a different reason, I find I can't forgive him.
At that moment, I couldn't grasp the meaning of David's words. A different reason. As I asked, David gave a shy smile.
Well, anyway, if you ever feel unsure about him, please feel free to ask me anything. I might be able to help.
I felt like I could tell David anything, as he was so understanding and attentive. He knew James' past well. So I thought if I discussed my current situation with him, he might help me find a way to resolve my issues. Moved by this thought, I shared with David everything from the time I met James to the present. David listened intently and quietly, his brow furrowed with a stern expression.
It's strange. What was James thinking when he got together with you?
I don't really understand his feelings either. As I responded, tears started to well up in my eyes. Talking to someone made me realize that I was living a life I wasn't satisfied with.
I understood. Just leave it to me.
I felt guilty for troubling someone with my personal situation. But David's kindness made me feel relieved and happy inside. I decided to resolve the ambiguous relationship with James with David's help. The next morning, I visited James' hospital room. I had heard from David that his post-surgery recovery was going well, so I wanted to talk to him. However, James didn't look at me even when I arrived. He just kept facing the window. Despite this, I wanted to clear things up, so I asked him without hesitation. Why have you kept quiet about it? With such a big tattoo, it was bound to be discovered eventually. Or were you planning to keep it hidden without maintaining our relationship as husband and wife? James remained silent at my question. Then he murmured softly,
I thought you would leave me too.
What do you mean by two? When I pressed him, James started talking about his past relationships. According to him, whenever someone he dated saw his tattoo, they would break up with him. James looks like a respectable young man who works hard. No one would ever guess he has a large devil tattoo on his back. It looked like something out of a dangerous organization. Weren't you only involved in bad activities until middle school? Why didn't you remove the tattoo when you reformed? When I confronted him, James glared at me with sharp eyes and shouted,
I just couldn't bring myself to remove this tattoo.
"Why?" I wanted to know the truth about James, but it seemed unlikely he would tell me. Instead, James turned the questioning on me.
More importantly, how do you know about my middle school days? I don't recall ever talking about that.
I heard it from the person who was the student council president back then.
David, huh?
It seemed James remembered David. I wondered why he had remained silent, even when he knew it was David. David had tried so hard to reform him. Why didn't you even say thank you to Dr. Johnson? He remembered you so well, and it's thanks to him that you reformed and are who you are today. At my question, James tilted his head.
What are you misunderstanding? I straightened up because a buddy of mine died in a motorcycle accident. I decided to quit riding and live a proper life for his sake. This tattoo is sort of a memento from him.
The truth about the tattoo was revealed. Still, I felt unsatisfied with James's explanation. Why, Dr. Johnson also tried to reform you, even facing resistance from your friends. It's terrible to say it's irrelevant like that.
Give me a break. Why do you keep taking David's side? Could it be that you like him?
James accused me, but I had no guilty conscience. After all, there was no reason for James to be jealous in such a strained relationship. I decided it was time to clear things up and asked James, "You don't love me, do you? What was the point of us getting married then?"
No, well.
James seemed at a loss for words. I glared at him with a look that said I wouldn't go anywhere until I got a clear answer. Well, make it make sense.
Well, it's just that I lost my parents in the last 2 to 3 years, so there was no one to do the chores, and I thought I needed to get married to do something about it.
And just for that. I was shocked to learn the true reason why James married me. Wanting to end the conversation, I left the hospital room. As I stepped out, there was David standing there. David had guided me to the lobby so that James wouldn't hear our conversation.
Just as I thought. Shall we proceed with what we planned?
Yes. I decided to go ahead with the contingency plan David had suggested in case things turned out for the worst. 2 weeks passed. Today was the day James was being discharged from the hospital. However, I hadn't visited James' hospital room since that day, and although I knew he was being discharged, I didn't go to the hospital to pick him up. I have been busy at work these last 2 weeks. While James was hospitalized, I acted as the CEO, handling various procedures. James needed to rest at home for a while even after his discharge. So I prepared meals for the day in the morning and worked until night. Since his hospitalization, James and I had become more estranged. With fewer face-to-face interactions, there were no more arguments. However, not seeing James's face made it easier for me to proceed with the task at hand. A month after his discharge, when he was feeling much better, James visited the company. Upon entering, he was shocked by the drastic changes inside the office. From the back office, I secretly watched his reaction.
What the hell? The manufacturing machines and the employees' desks. Everything's gone.
Hearing James's surprised voice, all the employees approached him.
Boss, we've been really grateful for all your support over the years.
What do you mean?
Confused, James looked around. Watching James, the employees exchanged glances. They were probably hesitating about who should break the news to him.
Actually, our company has been acquired and will merge with Johnson Industries located in the same area. Starting tomorrow, we will be re-employed there.
I wasn't informed about this.
James's voice echoed through the office as he was stunned by the news of the merger. Thinking it was about time, I showed my face to everyone. Oh, sorry, James, it was all decided so suddenly, I wasn't able to inform you.
What? A merger is a major issue that should be discussed with me, the CEO, first.
James was furious, his face turning red. That's true, but actually, there's been a complication. As I spoke, I showed him a photo. It was taken by a male employee who had recently left the company. A photo of James sneakily changing in the men's locker room. In it, the large devil tattoo on his back is clearly visible. The man had suspected that the company's president might be involved in something nefarious, and, after discussing it with other employees, decided to leave. Now, all the employees here harbored distrust towards James. There's the issue with the tattoo, but that's not the only reason. Since we got married, James has started dumping all the troublesome company procedures on me. And he had been sneaking out during work hours to go to casinos and horse races. I had known this for a while based on reports from neighbors. The photo taken by the former employee in the locker room was snapped when James was changing clothes during one of his sneaky getaways. It was only because the employee was late for personal reasons that he managed to capture this evidence. Other employees wanted to quit after learning everything, but that's when I disclosed the merger and acquisition news to everyone. One employee expressed his discontent to James.
Sir, we thought we couldn't continue under your leadership, dumping all your work on your wife and acting selfishly. And with that flashy tattoo, it really calls into question your character as a business leader.
All the surrounding employees nodded in agreement. James, distressed, muttered softly.
No, this tattoo has nothing to do with it.
Moreover, a man who can't even take care of one's wife has no business leading many people.
David said this as he entered.
David, why are you even here? This has nothing to do with you.
No, it very much does. I was the one who pushed for our company to merge with yours.
Yes. Indeed, the company that would be merging with James was Johnson Industries, led by David's brother. In essence, it was David's family business. David had been genuinely concerned that I shouldn't continue living with James. Not only had James failed as a husband, but he was also lacking as a president. That's why I had been facing so much stress, both personally and professionally. David had planned this move considering all these factors. Due to his own negligence at home and at work, James found himself completely isolated in this situation. Realizing he might lose everything, he then began to ingratiate himself with David.
Could you possibly let me join your company as well?
Just when I thought he was going to say something unexpected, he asked to be employed there as well. Everyone around looked at James with expressions of disbelief. David sighed and placed a hand on James's shoulder.
That would defeat the purpose of everyone here leaving this company. Besides, it's better to free Susan from you sooner rather than later.
Faced with David's words, James turned to me, pleading,
Susan, do you really want to leave me? How am I supposed to live on my own?
Responding to his desperate look, I retorted, I'm not the kind of person who can continue with a superficial marriage like this. I'm neither your mother or your maid. You need to learn to manage on your own. I decisively stated this, and James was left speechless. I decided it was time to put an end to this, presenting him with divorce papers. Also, I've decided to retrain as a carer at a hospital on Dr. Johnson's advice. I can support myself with my own earnings now, so let's get divorced. James panicked at my words.
Divorce? No, wait. You might be fine, but I can't survive being unemployed and alone.
James, just give up. You never think about anyone else. Always just yourself. Someone like that needs to be alone to reflect.
David shouted at James with a loud voice. Overwhelmed, James could no longer respond. And so, I left James and moved out. I started working as a carer while living in the hospital's staff dormitory. I felt like the odd one out though, as I was over 40, and others were mosty young nursing assistants. But I felt liberated from a burdensome life. Now, I'm determined to live independently and work hard. Meanwhile, James continued to live alone in the house. All the employees had moved to Johnson Industries, and the site of James's former company now lay vacant. Though unemployed, at least he didn't have to worry about rent, since the house was his own property. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Recently, as I pass by James' house during my commute, I hear loud voices of a man and a woman every day. No matter how late at night I walk by, I still hear shouting, so I asked the neighbors about it. According to them, James is now living with a woman. Perhaps because he said he couldn't live alone, he quickly found someone. However, the woman is reportedly complaining about James to the neighbors. When I asked what she was complaining about, it was just as I thought. James, who earns nothing and does no housework, still leaves all the cooking, cleaning, and laundry to his partner. Frustrated, she seems to be arguing with James almost daily. At times, it gets so bad that they throw things at each other, and the sound of breaking glass resonates throughout the neighborhood. Probably, A tattoo he initially hid was also discovered, and he might be getting complaints about that too. It seems a man like James never learns, no matter who he's with. The neighbors are all bothered by the noise from James's house late into the night every day. But after a while, someone apparently reported the noise to the police, and James was ordered to leave. I heard from the neighbors that the woman moved out at the same time she broke up with James. It seems like he hasn't found a new job yet, as I often see him wrapped in cardboard in the park. Since he has no fixed address, it's even more difficult for him to find reemployment. If he ever tries to talk to me, I plan to just ignore him and get away. However, I shouldn't have to worry about this anymore. After my training, I was appreciated for my work as a carer, and my salary increased significantly. They probably also considered my 20+ years of experience. I moved into an apartment and bought a car, considering night shifts. Now that I commute by car, I probably won't bump into the homeless James unless something extreme happens. At work, I often see David. Thanks to him, I've started to think positively about life. I feel like I've completely regained my true self. Actually, David has also been divorced once and seems to be single now. Among the staff, there's frequent rumors that David and I might remarry. But I'm so content with my life now that I think I'm done with marriage. David, who has a carefree personality, probably thinks the same. David and I, we are so similar. I don't think we'll date, but I want to continue working together at the same workplace and remain good friends. It's rare to find a friend you can talk about anything with at this age.